A folding table under a magnolia tree in a Georgia backyard, 1978. It sagged in the middle from the weight of everything on it. Potato salad in a yellow bowl, a punch bowl full of something red no one measured and everyone drank. A woman named Cora Lee Hutchins set that table every July for 31 years. She cooked for 40 people and never once looked at a recipe. Number 7 started the argument every year. Number 17 required a hole in the ground and a man who knew how to tend a fire all night. These were not restaurant meals. These were reunion meals, the kind that held families together across state lines and grudges nobody talked about, but everybody remembered. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count them down. Number 25, chitlin pie. This was the dish that separated the generations. The old folks lined up for it. The children ran. A woman in Macon, Georgia, made one every July reunion from 1954 until 1982. She cleaned the chitlins herself, boiled them with onion and bay leaf until tender, then folded them into a pie crust with gravy, black pepper, and a pinch of sage. The crust was lard-based, rolled thin, crimped by hand. She served it from a cast iron skillet. In the 1960s, a slice cost nothing because the intestines were nearly free. Butchers sold them by the bucket for less than $1. By 1985, the younger generation did not want to clean them. The smell alone took 4 hours of soaking and scrubbing to remove. And without someone willing to do that work, the pie disappeared from the table. It was not squeamishness, it was time. Number 24, hog head cheese. This was not cheese. It didn't have anything to do with dairy. It was the face of a pig, slow simmered until every scrap of meat fell from the bone, then seasoned with vinegar, hot sauce, onion, and celery salt, pressed into a loaf pan and chilled until the natural gelatin set it solid. You sliced it cold and ate it on crackers or white bread. In rural Alabama, a man named Roosevelt Jenkins made it every family reunion from 1961 to 1979. He got the hog heads from a slaughterhouse outside Selma for 35 cents each. His children fought over the last slice. By the late 1980s, slaughterhouses stopped selling hog heads to walk-in customers. Industrial processing changed the supply chain, and the knowledge of how to clean a hog head, how to judge when the gelatin was right, that lived in the hands of people who were getting old. When they stopped, nobody picked it up. Number 23, watermelon rind pickles. Your grandmother did not throw away the rind. She peeled off the green skin, cut the white flesh into cubes, and soaked them overnight in salt water. The next day, she boiled them in a syrup of sugar, vinegar, cinnamon sticks, and cloves until the cubes turned translucent and sweet. She packed them into mason jars and sealed them with paraffin wax. In the 1960s, jars of watermelon rind pickles showed up at every reunion table in the Deep South. A jar cost almost nothing to make because the rind was garbage to everyone else. By the 1990s, the canning tradition had faded. Younger women did not own pressure canners, and watermelon came pre-cut in plastic containers from the grocery store with no rind attached. The raw material vanished. The skill vanished with it. Number 22, crackling bread. This was cornbread with a secret. After a hog killing, the skin was rendered in a cast iron pot until the fat melted away and the skin crisped into golden, crunchy pieces called cracklings. You folded those cracklings into cornbread batter and baked it in a hot skillet greased with lard. Crispy on the outside, dense on the inside, with pockets of salty pork fat that melted on your tongue. In the 1950s, you could buy cracklings at any country store in Mississippi or Georgia for a few cents a bag. A woman in Yazoo City made crackling bread for every reunion from 1958 to 1981. She brought it wrapped in a flour sack towel inside a paper bag. By the mid-1980s, Hog killings had all but stopped. Families moved to cities, supermarkets replaced the smokehouse, and without fresh cracklings, the bread was just cornbread. It was good, but it was not the same. Number 21, possum and sweet potatoes. Nobody talks about this one, not anymore. But in the 1940s through the 1970s, it was a legitimate reunion dish in parts of Georgia and rural Mississippi. A man would trap the possum, pen it for a week on table scraps and sweet potatoes, then roast it whole in a pan surrounded by halved sweet potatoes basted in the drippings. The meat was dark, rich, and greasy. The sweet potatoes absorbed the fat and caramelized into something that tasted like a savory dessert. During the Depression, possum suppers were fundraising events for black churches. A church in Decatur, Georgia, held one every fall from 1932 to 1968. By the late 1970s, the tradition had faded. Younger men did not trap. Health departments frowned on wild game at gatherings, and the cultural association shifted. The dish didn't disappear because it tasted bad. It disappeared because people were told it was something to be ashamed of. Number 20, persimmon pudding. You had to wait for the first frost. That was the rule. A persimmon picked before the frost was so bitter it would turn your mouth inside out. But after the frost, it became honey sweet and soft enough to push through a colander. The pulp went into a batter of flour, eggs, buttermilk, sugar, and cinnamon. You poured it into a buttered pan and baked it slow until the top cracked and the inside set into something between a pudding and a cake. In the 1960s, a grandmother in rural North Carolina made one for every family gathering between October and January. She picked the persimmons from a tree behind her house. Her grandchildren waited for it the way other children waited for pie. The 1990s, the tree was gone. The house was gone. The persimmon pudding existed only in the memory of people who remembered what that kitchen smelled like. That was it. Number 19, smothered rabbit. This was the dish that started the argument. Every family had someone who claimed they made the best one. A man in Tuskegee, Alabama, hunted rabbits on his own land every fall from 1955 to 1983. He skinned them, soaked them overnight in salt water, dredged them in seasoned flour, browned them in a cast iron skillet, then smothered them in a gravy made from the pan drippings, onions, and a little water. The rabbit simmered on low heat for 2 hours until the meat slid from the bone. He served it over white rice. The whole plate cost him nothing but time and a box of shells. At the reunion, his pan was always empty first. His wife brought the side dishes. He brought the rabbit. That was the arrangement for 28 years. The thing about smothered rabbit is that it required a man who knew the land, knew where the rabbits ran, knew which fields had been sprayed and which had not. That knowledge was passed from father to son in the same backyard where the reunion happened. But by the 1980s, the sons had moved to Atlanta and Detroit and Chicago. The land got sold or sat empty. The rabbits kept running, but nobody was out there to catch them. By 1990, you could not find smothered rabbit at a reunion in Macon County. The men who made it were buried in the same churches where the reunions used to end with a prayer. Number 18, pear preserves. If your family had a pear tree, you had pear preserves. It was that simple. A woman in Bainbridge, Georgia, put up 40 jars every August from 1960 to 1984. She used hard green pears, the kind that were too tough to eat raw. She peeled them, quartered them, and cooked them down in sugar and water with a little lemon juice until they turned amber and soft and the syrup thickened into something that poured like warm honey. She brought 6 jars to every reunion and went home with none. Jar after jar, year after year, people ate them on biscuits, They spooned them over pound cake. They ate them straight from the jar with a fork. The cost was nothing but sugar and patience. But by the late 1980s, the pear trees were dying. Blight took some, developers took others. And the women who knew the exact moment when the pears were ready, who could judge the color of the syrup without a thermometer, they were growing too old to stand at the stove. Number 17, tea cakes. These were not cookies. Do not call them cookies. A black grandmother who heard you call her tea cakes cookies would correct you in a tone that ended the conversation. Tea cakes were flour, sugar, eggs, vanilla, and a touch of nutmeg. They were rolled thick, cut by hand, and baked until the edges barely turned golden. The inside stayed soft. A woman in Greenville, Mississippi baked 300 tea cakes for every family reunion from 1962 to 1985. She used a drinking glass to cut them because she said a cookie cutter made them too thin. She stacked them in a tin lined with wax paper. Children were allowed 2 each before dinner and as many as they could carry after. By the late 1980s, store-bought cookies had taken over. Younger women did not see the point of spending a whole afternoon baking something plain when you could buy a bag of Chips Ahoy for $1. But the difference between a tea cake and a store-bought cookie was the same as the difference between a handwritten letter and a text message. Only one made you feel held. Number 16, neck bone and rice. This was Tuesday night supper in most black households across the South. But at a reunion, it was made in a pot the size of a wash tub. Pork neck bones, browned in lard, then simmered with onion, garlic, salt, pepper, and enough water to make a thick, dark gravy that soaked into the rice and turned every grain brown. The meat fell off the bone in shreds. A plate cost about 11 cents in 1972. A woman in Meridian, Mississippi made it every reunion from 1965 to 1983. She bought the neck bones from a butcher who saved them for her because nobody else wanted them. That was the whole economy of soul food. You ate what nobody else wanted, and you made it taste like love. By the 1990s, neck bones were no longer the cheapest cut. Food television discovered braised meats, prices went up, and the dish that fed a reunion for under $5 started costing $15. The math stopped working. Number 15, chow chow relish. This was the condiment that tied the whole table together. You put it on everything. Black-eyed peas, greens, cornbread, barbecue. Chow chow was a pickled relish made from green tomatoes, cabbage, onions, peppers, mustard seed, and vinegar. Every woman who made it swore her recipe was different. A grandmother in Orangeburg, South Carolina, started making chow chow in 1949 and did not stop until 2002. She grew every ingredient in a garden behind her house on land her grandfather had bought in 1919. She chopped everything by hand. She cooked it in a pot that belonged to her mother. She brought 18 jars to every reunion and ran out before the peach cobbler was served. Chow chow was not just a relish. It was a calendar. It told you the season was changing. It told you someone still had a garden. That was the part that mattered, because by the 1990s, the gardens were disappearing. Generation after generation of women who grew their own food were passing. Their children had moved to apartments in Memphis and Birmingham and Houston. The jars stopped showing up, and the table felt different without them. Not wrong, but incomplete. Number 14, fried catfish in newspaper. Before paper plates and aluminum foil, fried catfish came wrapped in newspaper. A man pulled the fish from a pond, cleaned it on the bank, and his wife dredged it in cornmeal, seasoned with salt, pepper, and cayenne, then dropped it into a cast iron skillet of hot lard. When it came out golden, she laid it on newspaper to drain. At the reunion, The catfish table was always the longest line. A family in Holmes County, Mississippi, fried 200 pieces every July from 1959 to 1984. They set up the fryer under a pecan tree. The oil cost more than the fish because the fish came free from a cousin's pond. By the late 1980s, farm ponds were leased or fenced off. Health regulations changed, and the newspaper wrapping disappeared along with the tradition of frying outdoors while children ran circles around the yard. Number 13, red drink. Nobody called it punch. Nobody called it Kool-Aid. It was red drink, and every reunion had a version. The recipe wasn't written down because there was no recipe. It was 3 or 4 packets of cherry Kool-Aid mixed with sugar and water in a 5-gallon cooler, sometimes with a can of pineapple juice. It was served in paper cups so cold the condensation ran down your wrist. A woman in Savannah made red drink for her reunion every year from 1964 to 1988. She mixed it in a cooler her husband had used for fishing. She said the fish taste was gone. Nobody argued. The drink itself was a tradition older than the name. Historians trace it back to hibiscus, tea brewed in West Africa for centuries. By the 1990s, 2-liter bottles of soda replaced the cooler. It was faster, it was easier, but it was not the same. Nobody's going to remember the brand of a soda. Everybody remembers the red drink. Number 12, pig feet in vinegar sauce. You either loved them or you sat at the other end of the table. Pig feet were boiled for hours until the cartilage softened and the meat fell away from the knuckle. Then they were chilled in a bath of vinegar, onion, red pepper flakes, and bay leaf. You ate them cold with your hands. A jar of pickled pig feet sat in the refrigerator of every black grandmother in the South from the 1940s through the 1970s. A man in Birmingham bought a full case from a packing plant in 1974 for $2.60. He pickled them himself and brought a gallon jar to every reunion. The old folks ate them like candy. The young folks stared. By the 1980s, the price rose as packing plants exported more to markets where the price was higher. What had been a poor man's food became an export commodity. That's what happened. The jar disappeared from the table, not because anyone decided to stop. The economics changed underneath it. Number 11, blackberry cobbler from scratch. Not from a can, not from a bag in the freezer. From a bucket of blackberries, picked that morning from a patch behind somebody's barn. The thorns drew blood. Your fingers turned purple. And the cobbler that came out 2 hours later was worth every scratch. The filling was berries, sugar, and a squeeze of lemon. The topping was flour, butter, sugar, and buttermilk dropped on in spoonfuls so it baked into an uneven golden crust. A woman in Dawson, Georgia, made blackberry cobbler for the Watson family reunion every year from 1958 to 1982. She picked the berries herself at 5 in the morning before the heat set in. Her cobbler fed 30 people, and there was never a spoonful left. By the mid-1980s, the blackberry patches were gone. Fields were cleared. Herbicides killed the wild bushes along fence lines, and frozen berries produced a cobbler that tasted like a memory of a memory. Close, but not quite right. Number 10, butter bean stew. Butter beans were the backbone of a reunion table. They were cheap. They grew in every garden. And when a grandmother cooked them slow with a ham hock, onion, salt, pepper, and enough water to make a potlikker that soaked into cornbread like gravy, they became supper. A woman in Sumter, South Carolina, grew her own butter beans and put up 20 quarts every summer for 23 years. The ham hock flavored the whole pot for about 40 cents. By the late 1980s, home gardens were shrinking. Fresh butter beans were harder to find. Lima beans from a can replaced them, but a canned lima bean tastes like a canned lima bean. It doesn't taste like a bean, your grandmother shelled on the porch while telling you a story you did not realize was important until 20 years later. Number 9, whole hog pit barbecue. This was not grilling. This was a ritual. The men dug a pit 3 feet deep and 6 feet long. They burned hardwood down to coals, lowered in a whole hog on a wire grate, and tended the fire for 12 to 14 hours through the night. They drank coffee, they told stories, they argued about vinegar sauce versus mustard sauce, and by morning, the hog was done. The meat was pulled by hand and brought to the table still steaming. A family in Edgefield, South Carolina did this every reunion from 1951 to 1986. The pit was in the same spot every year. You could see the old burn marks in the ground. 3 generations of men stayed up all night to tend that fire. The cost was the hog itself, about $40 in 1975. It fed 100 people, but the Great Migration had already begun pulling people away from the land. Sons and grandsons moved to Philadelphia and Newark and Detroit. City codes did not allow open pits. Apartment balconies didn't have room for a 6-foot trench. And the knowledge of how to tend a whole hog through the night, how to read the smoke, how to know when the shoulder was done by the way the bone moved, that wasn't knowledge you could learn from a book. It lived in the hands of men who stood by a fire at 2 in the morning because their fathers had stood there before them. By the 1990s, those men were gone. Their sons came home for the reunion, but brought store-bought barbecue in aluminum trays. The pit stayed empty, and something in the air was missing. It wasn't just the smoke, it was the gathering. It was the reason to stay up all night, the excuse to stand around a fire and say things you wouldn't say in a living room. The pit was the one place where uncles who hadn't spoken in a year would stand shoulder to shoulder and agree on at least one thing, that the shoulder needed another hour. When the pit went cold, those conversations went with it. And that is the thing about reunion food that people forget. It was never just about the eating. It was about what you did to make it. The work was the reunion. The food was the proof it happened. Number 8, sweet potato pone. This was not sweet potato pie. Pie was for Thanksgiving. Pone was for the reunion. You grated raw sweet potatoes by hand on a box grater until your knuckles bled and your arms burned. Then you mixed the pulp with sugar, butter, eggs, cinnamon, nutmeg, and a splash of cane syrup. You poured it into a cast iron skillet and baked it for nearly 2 hours at low heat until the top formed a dark, caramelized crust, and the inside was dense and sweet and somewhere between a custard and a cake. A woman in Eatonton, Georgia, made sweet potato pone for 50 years. She grated the potatoes the morning of the reunion and had the scars on her knuckles to prove it. Her pone served 20 people from a single skillet. By the 1990s, nobody wanted to grate sweet potatoes by hand. Food processors didn't give the same texture. The pone needed the rough, uneven shreds that only a box grater could produce. The labor was the ingredient. Number 7, liver and onions. A black grandmother in the 1960s would not have called liver and onions a delicacy. She would have called it good sense. Chicken livers or beef liver, sliced thin, dredged in seasoned flour, fried in lard until the outside crisped and the inside stayed pink, then smothered in a mountain of slow-cooked onions and gravy. A plate of liver and onions at a reunion in 1972 cost less than 20 cents. Liver was the cheapest protein in the butcher's case. Nobody wanted it. Black women took it home and turned it into something a child would eat without complaint if the onion gravy was thick enough. The iron content alone made it healthier than most things on the table. By the mid-1980s, the health establishment turned against organ meats. Cholesterol warnings scared people away. Younger cooks found the texture unpleasant and the smell during cooking difficult to tolerate. Liver vanished from reunion tables and grocery store shelves. shrank their supply. What had fed generations for pennies became the thing nobody would touch. Number 6, oxtail stew. The name was misleading. By the 1960s, oxtail came from cattle, not oxen, but the name stuck. And in black kitchens across the South, oxtail was braised low and slow with onions, carrots, tomatoes, garlic, thyme, and bay leaf until the meat collapsed from the bone and the marrow melted into a gravy so thick it held a spoon upright. A woman in Jackson, Mississippi made oxtail stew for her reunion every year from 1963 to 1987. She bought the oxtails from a butcher on Farish Street for 75 cents a pound. Her pot fed 25 people. By 2005, oxtails cost $8 a pound. By 2024, $12. The dish that fed a reunion for under $4 now costs $50. Television chefs discovered what black grandmothers had always known. The price followed the attention. The reunion dish became the restaurant entree, and the people who created it could no longer afford it. Number 5, ambrosia salad. This was the dish that children were allowed to make. It required no cooking and no knife. You tore apart mandarin orange segments, sliced bananas, mixed in shredded coconut, miniature marshmallows, canned pineapple chunks, and folded everything together with sour cream or whipped topping. Some families added cherries, some added pecans. No two versions were the same. In the 1960s and 1970s, ambrosia showed up at every reunion table in the South. A woman in Valdosta, Georgia, made it in a cut glass bowl that came out only for reunions and funerals. The bowl was heavier than the salad inside it. By the 1990s, ambrosia was dismissed as old-fashioned. Younger family members brought store-bought fruit trays instead. The bowl went back into the china cabinet, and the reunion table lost one of the few dishes that every child loved and every adult secretly did too. Number 4, salmon croquettes. Every black grandmother kept a can of pink salmon in the pantry. It was cheap, it lasted forever, and it turned into dinner in 15 minutes. She drained the can, picked out the bones, mixed the fish with cracker crumbs, egg, onion, salt, and pepper, shaped it into patties, and fried them in hot oil until golden brown. At a reunion, someone always brought a platter. They sat on the table between the fried chicken and the deviled eggs. A woman in Augusta, Georgia, made hers with a dash of hot sauce and a teaspoon of mustard that she never told anyone about. She brought 24 to every reunion from 1966 to 1989. By the late 1990s, canned salmon lost its place in the pantry. Fresh fish became more accessible, and the croquette, born out of necessity, became a reminder of a time when a 69-cent can was the difference between a meal and an empty plate. Number 3, fried corn. Not corn on the cob, not creamed corn from a can. Fried corn. You cut the kernels from fresh ears of Silver Queen or Country Gentleman corn. Scrape the cob with the back of your knife to get the milk, then fried everything in a cast iron skillet with butter, a little bacon grease, salt, and pepper. The corn milk thickened into a natural cream that coated every kernel. It tasted like summer. A woman in Leesburg, Georgia, made fried corn for her reunion every year from 1959 to 1984. She used 18 ears. She cut and scraped everyone by hand. Her fried corn was gone in 10 minutes. By the mid-1990s, Silver Queen corn was harder to find. Supermarkets carried sweeter hybrid varieties that didn't have the starchy milk needed for the dish, and the patience to stand at a counter scraping 18 ears of corn one at a time with a paring knife was a form of devotion that the next generation did not inherit. Number 2, stewed tomatoes and okra. This was the garden on a plate. In July, when the tomatoes were splitting on the vine and the okra was coming in faster than you could pick it, somebody's grandmother put them together in a pot. She cut the okra into rounds, chopped the tomatoes, added an onion, salt, pepper, and a pinch of sugar to cut the acid. She simmered it low until the okra released its natural thickener and the tomatoes broke down into a sauce that clung to everything. A woman in Albany, Georgia, grew both the tomatoes and the okra in her garden and made this dish for every family reunion from 1957 to 1986. The cost was nothing but the labor of growing it. By the 1990s, fewer families had gardens. Grocery store tomatoes were bred for shipping, not flavor, and frozen okra produced a dish with none of the sweetness of something picked an hour before it hit the pot. The dish didn't disappear because anyone forgot the recipe. It disappeared because the garden did. Number 1, hog maw. This was the dish that nobody explained to outsiders. The stomach of a pig, cleaned and scrubbed until it was white, then stuffed with sausage, potatoes, onions, and cabbage, sewn shut and roasted for 3 hours. When it was done, you sliced it crosswise like a loaf of bread. Each slice was a complete meal, meat, starch, vegetable, all held together by the roasted stomach lining that had turned golden and chewy. A woman in Philadelphia who had come up from South Carolina in 1958 made hog maw for her family reunion every year until 1991. She cleaned the stomach herself. Her family drove from 3 states to eat it. The dish fed 30 people for under $6. By the mid-1990s, hog maw had become nearly impossible to find in city butcher shops. The supply chain had moved on, and the woman who made it didn't write the recipe down. She thought someone was watching. She thought someone was learning. She was wrong. The dish left the table the same year she did, and in a family of 87 people, not a single one knew how to make it. Number 22, baked macaroni and cheese. This wasn't the kind from a blue box. This was a Sunday production. A woman in Atlanta mixed elbow macaroni with 3 or 4 kinds of cheese, eggs, evaporated milk, butter, and a seasoning blend she kept in an unmarked jar. She poured it into a casserole dish and baked it until the top turned golden and the edges got crispy enough to snap. The middle stayed creamy and soft. The secret, she said, was in knowing when to pull it from the oven, not by a timer, but by the color of the crust. According to food historians, James Hemings, an enslaved chef who trained in France, brought macaroni and cheese to American tables in the 1700s, and 200 years later, Black women had perfected it into something that had everything to do with a kitchen full of family waiting for Sunday dinner. The recipe was never written down because it changed every time. A little more cheese one week, a little less milk the next. If you asked her how much of each, she couldn't tell you. She adjusted by feel, and it was never wrong.
Bread pudding with raisins was a quiet masterpiece of thrift and tenderness. Nothing in Mama's kitchen ever went to waste, especially bread. Leftover loaves were torn into pieces, soaked in sweet milk, eggs, and butter, then baked until the top turned golden and the inside stayed soft as custard. Raisins gave it sweetness, cinnamon gave it soul, and the smell gave it away before anyone asked what was cooking. It was humble food made holy, transforming scraps into comfort that filled every corner of the room. Families gathered around the pan the moment it came out, spoons ready, patience gone. Sometimes a drizzle of syrup or cream finished it off, but it never needed help. Every bite was warm, spiced, and familiar, the taste of Sundays and second chances. Bread pudding was proof that grace could be baked from what others might throw away. It carried the lesson that love does not come from plenty but from purpose. Mama never measured. She just knew when it felt right. That instinct made it perfect every time. Even now, the thought of it softens hearts, reminding us that what's made with care lasts longer than any recipe written down. fried catfish with cornmeal crust was the taste of Friday nights when payday met patience. Cleaned and seasoned with salt, pepper, and a grandmother's wisdom, the catfish was dredged in cornmeal and dropped gently into a pan of hot oil. The sizzle said it all, golden crust forming, flesh tender beneath. No recipe was written. Each family had its way. Some added paprika, others a little mustard. All made sure the fish was fried just right. Crispy edges, flaky center. Served with hush puppies or white bread, maybe a drizzle of hot sauce, it was joy you could hold in your hands. Black grandmothers turned this humble catch into a feast, feeding family, neighbors, and anyone who stopped by. Each bite was a reminder that simplicity, when done with care, could taste like abundance. Fried catfish was proof that mastery didn't come from money. It came from heart. The frying pan was like a stage, and Grandma was the conductor, listening to the rhythm of the oil, watching the color of the crust, knowing exactly when to lift each piece. A paper towel-lined plate sat ready to catch the fresh batch, steaming and golden, ready to disappear. The first taste was always the best, hot, seasoned, alive with memory.
Number 24, candied yams. In the Black Sunday dinner tradition, candied yams were not a side dish. They were a declaration. A woman in Birmingham, Alabama, peeled sweet potatoes with a paring knife so old the handle had been wrapped in electrical tape twice. She sliced them thick, layered them in a baking dish with butter, brown sugar, and a pour of vanilla she eyeballed from the bottle. No measuring spoons, no recipe, just decades of knowing how much sweet was enough. The yams went into the oven before church and came out when the sermon was over, bubbling in a syrup so thick you could hold a spoon upright in it. Some women added orange juice, others added nutmeg. The variations were as individual as the women who made them, and every version was correct because there was no written original to argue against. And by the early 2000s, most families had switched to canned yams from a grocery store. The slow-peeled, hand-sugared version faded out of your reach.
Buttermilk pound cake was the smell that pulled every child from the yard and every grown man from his nap. Dense, buttery, and baked golden in a bundt pan, it was the dessert that never needed frosting to impress. Mama would pour the batter thick and smooth, humming to herself as she scraped the bowl clean. The scent filled the whole house long before the timer rang, and by the time it came out, the crust had turned just crisp enough to flake under your fingers. The inside stayed moist, soft, and rich, melting on the tongue like memory itself. It was sliced thin for company, thick for family, and never served without a smile. No matter the occasion, Sunday supper, a homecoming, or a neighbor's visit, there was always room for pound cake. The sweetness was steady, never loud, and that was what made it special. It was love baked slow and simple, using what the pantry offered and nothing more. You did not need icing when your heart was already full. Every crumb tasted like care, and the smell lingered long after the plates were washed. Buttermilk pound cake was more than dessert. It was the promise that home was always warm. Smothered pork chops were the kind of meal that made the whole house quiet, except for the sound of gravy bubbling on the stove. You could smell it before you saw it. Thick onion gravy wrapping around fried pork until every bite turned tender and soft. It was never rushed, never careless, always cooked slow enough for the flavor to find its way inside. Families saved their best pan for it, the one that had seen birthdays and Sunday dinners and still held the shine of memory. There was pride in turning a cheap cut of meat into something that felt rich, even if you had almost nothing to work with. Children would sit nearby, waiting for that first plate, watching the steam rise like a promise. The cook never hurried, stirring slow, letting the onions melt into the gravy until it smelled like comfort itself. It wasn't fancy, but it felt sacred, a meal built from patience, love, and trust in what you had. Smothered pork chops weren't just food, they were proof that love could season anything, and patience could feed a family when money could not.
Number 20, cornbread dressing. This was the dish that caused family arguments at Thanksgiving, but it appeared on Sunday tables all through the fall and winter. A woman in Macon, Georgia, made cornbread a day ahead, crumbled it by hand, and mixed it with celery, onion, sage, boiled eggs, and chicken broth from scratch. The proportion of bread to broth was the whole secret, and she knew it by the feel of the mixture in her hands. Too dry and it crumbled on your plate, too wet and it turned to mush. She squeezed a handful, and if it held together but still felt light, the ratio was right. No recipe could teach you that. It was knowledge that lived in a woman's fingers, passed from mother to daughter by standing side by side in the kitchen. The sage was the signature. Too much, and it tasted like medicine. Too little, and it tasted like wet bread. Her amount was perfect, and she could not have told you what it was.
Caramel cake was the showstopper of every Sunday table, a golden beauty that looked like celebration and tasted like devotion. Mama would stand by the stove, stirring sugar and butter until it turned just the right shade of amber, never letting it burn. The caramel frosting had to be watched, whispered to, and poured at the perfect moment. Too soon, and it ran thin. Too late, and it stiffened like candy. But when she got it right, it draped over soft yellow layers like satin. The cake was tender, buttery, and rich enough to make conversation stop mid-sentence. Folks cut it carefully, as though it might disappear if handled wrong. The sweetness clung to your teeth, the flavor to your heart. Caramel cake was not just dessert. It was a skill, a tradition, a gift that proved patience could taste like perfection. It was the dessert everyone waited for and nobody refused. Long after the plates were empty, people still talked about that frosting, shiny as glass and sweet as memory. It was a labor of love and proof that the best things in life take time, attention, and a steady hand stirred by care. Okra gumbo was a stew that told an entire history in one pot. It started with a roux, flour and oil stirred low and slow until it turned deep brown, like roasted nuts. Then came the okra, tomatoes, onions, and sometimes sausage or shrimp, depending on what the day offered. The pot thickened as it simmered, rich with flavor and memory. Black grandmothers stood over it with wooden spoons, never rushing, knowing that gumbo was as much about patience as it was about spice. Served over rice, every bowl felt like home. Each region had its version, each family its secret. Gumbo carried Africa, the Caribbean, and the American South together, all in one dish. It wasn't just food, it was heritage, preserved through hands that remembered more than words ever could. Some grandmothers swore by a little file powder, others said the secret was in the stir. But all agreed, you had to cook it with care, never anger. The smell alone brought people running because gumbo meant company. You could taste the generations in it, the stories, the laughter, and the love that survived every hardship.
Number 23, collard greens. If you walked into a black kitchen on a Sunday morning and did not smell greens simmering with the smoked ham hock, something was wrong. Collard greens were the backbone of the Sunday table, and the recipe existed only in the hands of the woman stirring the pot. She started with the ham hock, dropped into a deep pot of water. She added vinegar, whichever bottle she grabbed first. She tore the collard leaves off the stems by hand, washed them 3 times in cold water, and packed them into the pot so tightly the lid barely closed. Then she cooked them low and slow for 3 hours until the leaves turned silky and the potlikker at the bottom became the richest broth you ever tasted. The seasoning was salt, pepper, a little sugar to cut the bitterness, and whatever else her mother's hands had taught her. No two women made their greens the same way, and if you asked which version was best, you would start an argument that still has not been settled. Here is my challenge to you. Pick one dish from this list. Just one. The one that made you close your eyes while I was talking because you could smell it. The one that took you back to a table under a tree in somebody's yard with the sun going down and your grandmother telling you to fix a plate before it was all gone. Make it this week. Sit down at the table, not the couch. Set a plate. Use the good fork, because these dishes were never just food. They were proof that a family could survive anything: migration, poverty, time, distance, and still come back to the same table every July. Share which dish brought you back in the comments. I want to know if the chitlin pie still has believers, or if the tea cakes finally won the argument. I want to know who still remembers a grandmother who could cook for 40 without measuring a thing, because these are not just recipes that disappeared. They are evidence that love once had a flavor, and if you were there, you never forgot it.